Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring non-typical music. That covers a very wide range of things. Kind of tough to explain that beyond just saying, yeah, the stuff you don't typically hear. I know we're in store for that today, though, because we have Boredoms in store for us. We're going to be checking out a 23-minute song from them called Seadrum. It looks like it comes off of an album that only has 2 tracks on it, Seadrum and House of Sun. Boredoms, man, this band, every time I listen to them, I'm like, wow, that's different, which I guess is a good way to describe non-typical music as a theme. Anyways, let's dive into this, see what Seadrum is bringing to the table today. Okay. The chimes are a nice... Feels like being transported away. Lots of reverb on these drums. Cool use of spatial positioning of some of these they're all percussive instruments, aren't they? Rising tempo, playing around with dynamics as well, volume dynamics. do have melodic instrumentation in here now. Trying to figure out if this is more overbearing and anxious or fun and unreserved. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, where my experience is a bit more anxious, but the music is more loose and open. Interesting to hear the contrast too between the more repetitive hyperlooped sections and the more free-form improvised sections. Well, at least they seem improvised to me anyways. Great use of texture, especially on the transitions. I'm becoming a bit fatigued by the lack of harmonic movement though. I've heard a series of chords in the past, but the lead melodies don't seem to be changing. Keys at all? There's no chordal movements in the melodic writing. the background, occasionally you can hear somebody just running up and down a piano. In the background, you can hear a piano changing chords. But the shifting chords aren't altering the notes that the two vocal lines are doing. And in the past, when there's been a melody on top of chordal movement, it hasn't altered the notes used in that melody either. Okay, I'll take a little bit of halftime over the intensity of the previous section. Yeah, it's getting chaotic again, of course. A marimba now. it's interesting that this compositionally isn't too different from anything else we've heard, but I think because of slightly reducing the layers and bringing the volume down, it feels more meandering. And this is already a song that's just kind of taking its time and doing its own thing. Oh man, it's borderline ridiculous how drawn out this ending is. Okay. I have a tough time with works like this. I have, and I'll be clear to admit this, my bias in music is narrow. My understanding of music is narrow. If you give me a song within a very typical Western perspective of composition, I'll do a pretty good job of explaining what I'm getting out of it, the techniques used in the composition, structure, and explaining how the music is as emotional as it is, telling the story that it is. But when you pull me outside of that, when you give me noisier ideas or lengthier explorations of, a very singular composition, you give me stuff like free jazz, avant-garde music, jam sessions, and a lot of stuff outside of typical Western music too. I find myself flailing a little bit because my understanding of music doesn't quite capture that. And that's where this falls. This is a lot of it's non-typical music, right? That's what I expected from this week. But I made an interesting realization. It was about 17 minutes into this song. I thought, they're not really saying anything different now than earlier in the song. What's the point of the length if the message isn't changing? And this is very much about this narrow viewpoint because this song isn't about a message. It's not about telling a story, not in the traditional sense. Anyways, this is about being in the moment. This is the Wes Anderson film of music. It's not about the destination. It's not about the story told. It's not about any larger ideas or I mean sometimes maybe themes in Wes Anderson, but it really is just about being in the moment and enjoying scene to scene, enjoying being in that moment of the film. And I think that's true here as well. You really just have to open yourself up to being washed over by this sonic wave. Not really caring about where it's going, not trying to figure out what the purpose of the length is or any of that. Because it's not traditionally written, where it's designed to get to an endpoint, where everything is moving towards a finality. The ending of the song does come, but honestly, the ending really isn't any different from the opening. It isn't any different from the rest of the track. The song doesn't really drive towards an ending, it just eventually ends. It's not about the final point, it's about the journey itself, not the destination. And I think that was an interesting realization to make here. Because it kind of helped me take a different approach to this. Now, I do want to say real quickly, I wasn't a real big fan of the song. I think it is great at points, but because most of the points are very similar in what they're doing. Obviously, there's different melody lines going on. A lot of this feels improvised to me. It may be 23 minutes of pre-composed music, and they play this exactly the same every time they get on stage. But at least to my ears, there's so much linearity to it that memorizing this whole thing and playing it note for note perfect would be a monumental task. And maybe they do, and huge props for them for doing it. But it feels improvised to me. But despite all of the different elements going on, the end result of most of this song is the same from moment to moment. Fast moving percussive stuff, wild textures, repeated licks, and two vocalists kind of doing whatever they want on the side, and then some melody that's just kind of doing whatever it wants in the center of the channel. It's that structure doesn't really change much. There is no chordal movement in here at all. So we don't have any harmonic change at all. It's just a very static song. What you get starting from minute 3 or so is pretty much what you get when you wrap the song up too, and there's no change in between. And that is very how would I put this? It's very draining for me. I need movement. And without any strong focus to the song, the production is very well done. Every instrument is clearly heard, but no instrument is really given preference. There is usually multiple melody lines going on at any time, and none of them are working with each other. Yeah, it is technically counterpoint, but there's no cohesion to it. It's just two disparate ideas that happen to be playing at the same time. Neither are really given any sort of import. Neither of them tell me a story that drives to the end. This is a really wild idea of using melody as a harmonic device. I'm going to touch on this later. It's a very odd use of melody in a song. But I just don't have anything to latch onto here. There's no changing landscape. There's no story being told to me, to my ears. It's one of those things that you just have to absorb emotionally rather than mentally. And I tried to do that in a couple of places, and I couldn't connect with the song either. I find no enjoyment out of listening to this beyond the first few minutes after the novelty of the sound became the thing the song is, and there was no contrast to it, really, besides a few dynamic ideas here and there. I had a tough time enjoying this. I had a tough time understanding it, but I still have some things I want to say that are interesting about it. So I think that's where we're going to go. I just wanted to get that negative stuff out of the way, and now we can focus on some really cool stuff going on here. First of all, very interesting collection of sounds, timbres, instruments. It is a highly percussive track, which I guess I should have assumed. It is called Seadrum, and I will say that the percussive side is the most represented group of family of instruments on this. We do have vocals. We have a vocalist who I assume is double tracking two totally different ideas. Props to them for recording two completely different 20-minute parts. That is a huge undertaking right there. We do have piano, we have chimes, and we eventually got a marimba, which is technically part of the percussion family because it is a struck instrument, but it is a pitched percussion instrument. I think it's the only one we have in here. Other than the chimes, they're pitched too, but usually you don't pick out a single chime. You just kind of, swipe your hand or some sort of stick through them to get the sound of the chime movement. And technically also piano is a percussion instrument too. It is a hammer hitting a string. So on a technicality, maybe the vocals are the only non-percussion instrument in here. Yeah, actually, I can't think of another instrument in here that wouldn't fall under percussion. Okay, so yeah, it's not even just that they're the most represented. Aside from the vocals, they are the only represented instrument. We don't have any woodwinds in here. We don't have any brass. We just have percussion. We don't have strings. Okay, cool. So yeah, Seadrum, totally percussive percussion instruments, and they have a wide variety too. I've already listed, a few of them. The pitched ones, the piano, the marimba, chimes, but we also have a lot of drums. Sounds like a lot of hand drums in here, but I think we also have, I don't know, there is something being hit with a stick of some sort. I don't know if it is a traditional snare, bass drums, but there are non-hand, non, there are percussive instruments where you don't use the hands to hit them in here. They create a bit of a sharper attack versus a lot of the softer, rounder sounds that you get from finger tapping and hand tapping. But there's also just textures. I don't know. There sounds like what is that? I don't know. It's like a very flexible sheet of metal that creates in theater. They use it for like the sound of thunder and stuff like that, and kind of like wave it and it warps and creates cool sounds. Anyways, I heard that a couple times or something like that. I don't know if it's particularly what it is. In the background, there's scratching and clashing sounds going on, scraping. There's all sorts of interesting sounds going on that I'm going to assume are not digital, given that everything in here feels or sounds at least acoustic. Maybe this whole thing is completely made out of a sound library, but at least to my ears, it could all be replicated with real instrumentation. And so we have a plethora of different timbres of rhythmic percussive instruments, stuff like, drums and snares and stuff that isn't really, it has a pitch to it, but you don't have a shifting pitch. You just have the one pitch that it has. Then we have the pitched instruments, and then we have the vocals. And it's a cool group of sounds that they have on this. It creates an atmosphere, a soundscape that is distinct. You don't really hear this too often. And I think they do a great job of leaning into that. They take all of these sounds and create something a bit positive out of it. See, here's the thing. Like I mentioned earlier on, I don't know what the emotional read is on this. Without a chord progression, I just have a chord, and a chord does not really give emotional information. We do understand that major chords have a brighter sound and minor chords have a darker sound to them, but you can't really make a sad song out of one minor chord. It's just not going to impact people very strongly. You're going to have to add information to that. And that information could be given through the melody. Your melody could pull notes from other chords, and that can inform the one chord that you want to put under it, I suppose. But if you're only going to choose the 7 notes of one minor chord, you're not really going to make something too effective. Chord progressions are where emotions really come from. It's our understanding of the relationships between different groups of notes. And so I don't get a lot of harmonic information out of this. We do have a generally brighter tone overall, and the eclectic combination of sounds and the feeling like most of these instruments don't care what anyone else is playing leads me to feel something that's very unrestrained, something that's a bit fun, sort of just saying, play whatever you want. That can certainly be a fun time. But me personally, I do get a lot of anxiety out of this. It is a lot of noise, not necessarily cacophonous in harmony, but definitely cacophonous in synergy. Some of the purely rhythmic devices do line up, but not all of them do. Harmonically, we're primarily looking at one chord, but there are some instruments that choose to play several chords within this key. They don't really say much, but they do exist, and the melodies seem to ignore any of these other chordal movements, and they also ignore all the other melodies. I have made this comparison to similar songs in the past, and I still feel like it is appropriate here. This sounds like a band warming up. If you've ever been in a larger group of musicians all coming together before you rehearse or play a performance, this is what a warm-up room sounds like. Now, granted, this is a bit more cohesive. There is rhythmic acknowledgement going on here and harmonic acknowledgement. Those two things do keep this song glued together and moving forward. Everybody has a consistent tempo, and they generally land on similar beats. We do have an emphasis on like quarter notes and particularly beat 1 of bars. So there is that. And like I said, everyone is generally in this key, so we don't have any dissonance in here. This is definitely more cohesive than a bunch of people warming up. And it is more cohesive than some of the other avant-garde music you'll have had me listen to in the past. But like I said, nobody really seems to care or want to work with any other part. It is a bunch of disparate ideas that just happen to be playing within the same meter, tempo, and key. And so the cacophony of all of this makes me feel anxious. Also, the speed, the drive of the hand drums in most of this song is rather quick. We're not really going anywhere, but we are definitely moving at a fast speed. And so I feel like the song is supposed to be fun, laid back, carefree. But I feel the opposite of that through most of this track. And a lot of it is my relationship to this type of disconnected composition. And so, like I mentioned early in the reaction, this kind of puts me in an interesting place where I don't know what to feel here. I know what I feel here, and I have an idea of what the intention is supposed to be, but there's such a schism between the two of them. But there is one thing I really love about this track. And it helped center me in some of the times when I found myself getting drained from the sheer length of the song, but also the hyper repetition of feeling. The dynamics, they do help break the song up. We have sections that add layers, we have reduction of layers, we have sections that raise the volume, that lower the volume, we have, vocal parts that come in, we have vocal parts that leave, textures. I mentioned the scraping and the clashing sounds and all the stuff that exists in the background and on the outskirts of the track. They help fill space in and open space up. And this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that despite saying that the song feels very samey across the entirety of the song, there is dynamic movement to it. It's all of these little things. They do add up. There are certainly quieter sections of the song and louder sections of the song. There's denser sections of the song and thinner ones. It is obviously a song with portions to it that is constantly in flux. This helped a little bit. It was one of the small elements of the track that I could lean on to with more of a traditional perspective on music and understand and grasp and help me get through the experience. But it was also such a small part of the track too. Most of the dynamic movements are a bit on the smaller side. What if we remove a couple of ideas? What if we add one extra melody in here? What if we put some moving chords for a moment? The large sweeping ideas where we have reduction of layer and tempo and volume happened very infrequently. And to a point, I would probably break this song up into 5 or 6 key moments, despite the fact that it is constantly in flux. Okay, bear with me. I just had a brainwave. What if Seadrum is supposed to be very literally red? What if this is supposed to be a song comprised of percussion instruments that metaphorically create a sonic representation of the sea, ocean, a large body of water, the ebb and flow of waves, the shifting and movement of water molecules? So many different parts are constantly changing, but at the end of the day, it's still just the sea. That is why the song doesn't change, but is constantly changing. There really isn't much of a difference from start to finish, but we went through a very large trek to go there, nowhere. It really depends on your perspective of the song, I suppose. It is a C drum. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be read. That's, like I said, I could be way off on this, but that just clicked with me when I had mentioned many moving parts, but always being the larger whole. If that's true, I have found something within my more narrow understanding of music that can help me understand some of the thematic elements here that not necessarily gives me a story, but at least the core theme to it. Because otherwise, like I said, this song is just fun. Anxious for me, but generally has fun, loose vibes. And beyond that, I don't really get anything out of it. But if it is a representation of something, I can come at it from that artistic, thematic perspective. I have a bit more appreciation for it based on that read. That's not to say that I would have less appreciation if I didn't have that read, but I just wouldn't know where to put my appreciation towards it. I don't really have anything beyond that read that I really get out of this song. It is something that exists, and that's about it for me. I'm curious for people who enjoy this. I mean, if you don't enjoy this track, sure, put some comments down there too, I guess. Always good to feed the algorithm. But if you do enjoy this, I am legitimately interested in what about it you enjoy. I have a hypothesis that most of it is going to be, like I mentioned earlier, about being in the moment, maybe meditative or trance that you get put into while listening to it. Maybe it is an emotional or mental journey. You just close your eyes and I don't know, you have an experience formed and manipulated by the sound waves going into your ears. The song itself takes you on a mental journey. I'm really curious. I am. It's not that I don't see potential in the song. It's not that I don't see purpose to it. I just personally didn't get any, and I know other people would. And that's the cool thing about art is just because I don't get it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just literally means I didn't get it. Skill issue right there. And maybe having a little direction on how to obtain the skill, what skill I might even need to obtain, would help in my not even getting it, just appreciating it. I don't think there's lyrics to this, but I'm gonna go look anyways because there are vocal parts. And yeah, then we're gonna wrap this up. And there are no lyrics apparently, just vocal sounds going on through here. So nothing to add to that. We're gonna wrap this up. Then these are my thoughts on Boredoms Seadrum. Let me know what you thought of this, if you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, if there's anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or correct me on if I misspoke about something. If you have your own opinion or perspective on this, please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.